Good morning, neighborhood kids and everyone else. I am so glad you are here today with Ellie and Emmy and myself to hear another story from God's Word, the Bible, which we know is absolutely true and completely trustworthy. And it teaches us how to live lives that please who we call capital G God, not the little g gods that are all around us. And we want to please him because he made heaven and earth and us, and we love him. In your classes, last time when we were together, we met a young man named Joseph. And Joseph's brothers had sold him to a caravan of traders who were going to Egypt. And after many, many hard years in Egypt, Joseph became the second most important man in all of Egypt. And he was preparing the country for a famine which was to come. And last week in your classes, kids, you learned that famine came. And when that famine came, it meant that people didn't have enough food. And so Joseph was selling the food that he had collected and saved up when there was still plenty of food around. And people would come from all over to buy food all over Egypt. And then a group of 10 brothers came all the way from Canaan. And Joseph recognized that those were his brothers who had come to buy food. And they were so surprised when he told them who he was, and even more surprised that he forgave them. He said, "It is okay that you did that because look what God has done. He's made it so that we have food." And so he gave food to the brothers to take home to their father in Canaan. And eventually, his father Jacob came to live in Egypt with him. And when we get to the end of the book of Genesis, we find that Jacob has died and the 70 people that came with him to live in Egypt have grown. And as we turn the page to the book of Exodus, those 70 people have grown to about 2 million people over about 400 years. We call those people the Israelites because if you remember, Jacob had his name changed by God to Israel. And so anyone who was born after him, his children and grandchildren and all, were called the Israelites. I want you to think back for a moment to a word covenant that we have learned and talked a lot about. Covenant being a promise from God to man. And God made a promise to Abraham and then to Isaac and Jacob that he would grow them into a nation. Do you think 2 million people counts as a nation? I sure do. We can see that God is a promise keeper. Well, Joseph is still in Egypt with Pharaoh. Actually, by this time, Joseph has also died, I should say. And the Israelites are still here. Pharaoh, a new king, is leading the country. And he sees these 2 million people, and he is afraid of them. He's afraid they might turn on him or might run away. And so he makes them become slaves. And they have to build bricks and cities and work hard out in the fields. But the Israelites continued to grow in number. And Pharaoh became more afraid of them. And so he made a law. And he said, "I want all of the baby boys killed when they are born." You got it. And if you don't kill them right away, I want you to throw them in the river and let them drown. Does that sound horrible? He was that afraid of the people that he wanted to kill. And there was an Israelite family who had a beautiful baby boy, and the mom knew that she just could not kill him. And so she hid him for 3 months. And finally, it just got too hard to hide him any longer, and so she wrapped him up and put him in a basket and had covered that basket with tar so no water could get into it. And then she had his big sister hide nearby. And they put that basket at a place where the princess would come every day. The princess, the daughter of Pharaoh. And she came and she heard this baby. And she took him out of the basket and made him her own son. And so Moses, as she called him, because he was taken out of the water, was raised in a palace with the best food, the best education, and he grew up there in Egypt in the palace. He was saved. Well, there came a day when Moses, we're going really fast through his story, is now 40 years old. And he knew that he was an Israelite. And he saw how the Egyptians were treating the other Israelites, and it was not good. And it bothered him so much that when he saw something one day, he killed the Egyptian. And he buried him. And then he thought, what have I done? I am going to get in so much trouble. And so he ran. He ran as fast as he could and as far as he could. And something got stuck. There we go. To a land called Midian. This is Egypt over here. Midian is way over here in the desert. And he ran and he ran and he ran. And he found a family there who raised sheep. And he grew and lived there a long time. He was married. He had children. You want to put up? And one day, we read that he was out near Mount Sinai, the mountain of God, with the flocks from his family, and he saw something very interesting. He saw a bush, and that bush was burning, but it wasn't burning up like you would think a bush would. And so he walked over to look at it. And as he was walking, he heard the voice of God. And the first thing God said to him was, can you hold these up? Take off your sandals. You are standing on holy ground. And so he did. And God told Moses, he said, I have heard the cries of the people, and it's time for me to act. I am going to do something. I am going to take them out of Egypt and take them to a land flowing with milk and honey. Now, it doesn't really mean that there are rivers of milk and honey is everywhere. It just means that it's a very good land for growing crops. And we call that land Canaan, or today we call it Israel. And God told Moses, I've chosen you to be the one to take the people out of Israel. Now, I want you to stop and think here. Kids, if your mom and dad say to do something, you immediately go and do it, right? You don't give them excuses, you just obey. Do you know what Moses did? This is God speaking to Moses. He did not obey God. He gave God 5 excuses and said, I am not good enough. I am the wrong one. Do not ask me to do this, God. Can you believe he said that to God? That made him very, very angry. Now, God can be angry because he does not sin. He does not do wrong things when he gets angry like we might do. And so God said, all right, Moses, I will send your brother Aaron with you. And so Moses went and found his brother Aaron, and he told him all that had happened with this burning bush and what God's plan was for them to take the Israelites out of Egypt. Aaron got excited, and they went and they told the leaders of Israel what was going to happen. They were so excited that God was going to act and take them out of slavery that they fell down on their faces and worshiped God. They were so excited. We can see in this story, as well as many others, that God is a promise keeper. When he says he's going to do something, he does it. That is part of the covenant. God does what he says he will do. And he has fulfilled the first part of that covenant by growing the nation of Israel from one son, Isaac, to now over 2 million people. And now God is going to bring those people into the land of Canaan and give them that land. You know, God is still a promise keeper. And if we believe that his son Jesus died on the cross, we can ask to be forgiven of all of our sin, those wrong things that we think, do, and say, and he will forgive us. And he will give us the promise of an eternity in heaven with him where it is perfect and beautiful and wonderful. And the best part is, while we are still here, we get to live as devoted fans of God. We are not slaves like the Israelites were. We get to show that we love God, and we get to know him more by reading his word, by praying, and by being at church together.